Okay, so today we're diving into an absolutely wild piece of history. We're talking about the Jagat Sets, a spectacularly powerful banking family whose calculated actions and, honestly, sheer thirst for revenge ultimately handed an entire, wildly prosperous empire straight over to the corporate rule of the East India Company. It's basically a masterclass in how economic power can completely usurp state power and how a personal vendetta can literally redraw the map of the world. So buckle up because we're getting right into a story of unimaginable wealth, deep betrayal, and massive historical consequences.
Seriously, think about the butterfly effect for a second. How on earth does a single, seemingly small personal insult, literally a physical slap and a threat, trigger the complete collapse of a nation? We so often think of history as being shaped by these grand military strategies or inevitable shifts in global politics, right? But as our sources reveal, the path to the colonization of one of the absolute richest regions on Earth was actually paved by wounded egos. It was driven by a deep, burning desire for revenge from the very men who held the purse strings. To really grasp this, we have to look at the staggering economic reality of the time. Back in the 17th century, the Indian subcontinent, with Bengal right at its heart, was an absolute economic powerhouse. We're talking about producing nearly 25% of the entire global GDP. It was the wealthy golden bird of the world, just teeming with high-value textiles like muslin and silk, and absolutely dominating global trade. Meanwhile, England was, by comparison, a relatively poor agrarian society. The East India Company wasn't arriving as these mighty conquerors. They were basically marginalized traders, just begging for a piece of this massive wealth. So to understand how the tables turned so dramatically, we really have to look at who controlled that wealth. Enter the ultimate power brokers of the era. The foundation was initially laid by a Marwari merchant named Manek Chand, but it was under Mahtab Chand and his brother Swarup Chand that this family leveled up to unprecedented heights. They were so powerful that the Mughal Emperor Farrukh Siyar officially gave them the title Jagat Seth, which literally translates to Banker of the World. And that wasn't an exaggeration. They weren't just ordinary merchants. They practically functioned as the central bank for Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. They managed the state revenues, they controlled the mints, and they held the exclusive right to send the annual revenue directly to the Mughal court in Delhi. Operating out of Murshidabad, which was essentially the commercial hub of Asia at the time, the Sets basically became kingmakers. They held so much financial leverage that they actively funded rulers like Murshid Quli Khan, and later they were the main financial muscle behind Alivardi Khan's rise to the throne of Bengal. Think about it. When you control the state's revenue and you possess enough liquid wealth to fund armies and entire empires, you're no longer just a subject. You are the invisible hand steering the fate of the state itself.
So how exactly did they keep this iron grip on everyone? Well, 10 to 12%. That was the staggering interest rate that Jagat Seths charged for their loans. And the crazy part? They lent to absolutely everyone. They lent to the Mughal court, they lent to local landlords, and crucially, they lent heavily to the European trading companies, including the British East India Company. The Seths essentially wove this vast, inescapable economic web of debt. Everyone, from the local rulers to the foreign merchants, was tied up in their financial strings. It was a massive empire built on high-interest loans and total monopoly over currency exchange.
But, every empire has its tipping point. Under Nawab Ali Wardi Khan, the Sets were highly respected. They operated with massive, pretty much unchecked influence. But when Ali Wardi Khan passed away, his young, highly impulsive grandson, Siraj ud-Daulah, took the throne. And Siraj? He was deeply suspicious of the Sets. He hated their unchecked power and their whole state-within-a-state vibe. So he aggressively tried to curb their financial control. Almost overnight, that mutual respect was just gone, replaced by intense friction and a terrifyingly drastic shift in the power dynamic.
And here is the exact moment the whole thing shatters. According to the historical records, the breaking point arrived when the young Nawab Siraj ud-Daulah demanded a massive sum of 3 crore rupees from the Jagat Seths to fund his military campaigns. The Seths, feeling untouchable, outright refused. Well, in response, an infuriated Siraj audited their accounts, publicly insulted them, and reportedly physically assaulted Mahtab Chand, literally striking him and threatening him with whips. Just imagine that. For the wealthiest, most prideful bankers in the world, this level of profound public humiliation was totally unforgivable. It triggered an absolute, unquenchable thirst for revenge.
And that thirst for revenge birthed the absolute blueprint for the Plassey conspiracy. Now, the Jagat Seths didn't have an army of their own, right? But they had something just as lethal, practically infinite capital. So they systematically organized a highly calculated plan to completely dismantle the Nawab's power. Step 1. Form a secret alliance with Robert Clive and the East India Company. Step 2. The Sets agreed to finance the entire impending war out of their own pockets. Step 3. Use their immense wealth to heavily bribe the Nawab's own inner court. And finally, secure the ultimate treason from Mir Jafar, the Nawab's own chief military commander.
Just wrap your head around this number, 4 crore rupees. This was the specific, staggering amount of cash promised by the Jagat Seths to Mir Jafar to absolutely guarantee his betrayal. This wasn't just a simple bribe, guys. It was the literal price tag of a nation's sovereignty. They were literally buying a puppet ruler to install on the throne. The Seths viewed this whole conspiracy as the ultimate business investment to secure their total, undisputed financial dominance over the entire region.
Which brings us to the infamous date, June 23, 1757. As the sources clearly point out, the Battle of Plassey was effectively bought, not fought. It was this lethal combination of disciplined British military strategy under Clive and the massive, paralyzing bribes distributed by the Jagat Seths that sealed the deal. Because of the Seths' behind-the-scenes financial maneuvering, Mir Jafar's forces just stood entirely still during the battle. They didn't lift a finger. This secured a swift, decisive defeat for Siraj-ud-Dowlah without the British even having to face the full might of the Bengal army.
But man, the tragic irony of what happens next is just staggering. See, the Jagat Seths completely succeeded in getting their revenge, but they fundamentally miscalculated the true nature of their new allies. They honestly thought they were just installing pliable puppet rulers in Mir Jafar and later Mir Qasim. But they quickly realized that the East India Company wasn't just a friendly trading partner anymore. The company was rapidly becoming the dominant political and military force in the region, systematically stripping away the very power the Seths thought they had just secured for themselves.
And the karmic payback for their betrayal was absolutely brutal. By 1763, the very puppet rulers they had spent a fortune to install completely turned against them. An angered, desperate Mir Qasim, who was quickly losing his own grip on power to the British, actually imprisoned the very architects of the conspiracy, Mahtab Chand and Swaroop Chand. In a genuinely horrifying end, the two most powerful bankers in the world were taken to the peaks of Munger Fort and ruthlessly thrown to their deaths into the Ganges River below. The bankers of the world were ultimately destroyed by the exact political instability they themselves had engineered.
When you map it out, the speed of this collapse is just mind-blowing. In 1757, the Seths achieved their ultimate victory at Plassey. Just 6 short years later, in 1763, they are executed. And merely 2 years after that, in 1765, the East India Company officially gains the Diwani, which is the total legal right to collect revenues in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. The British company completely usurped the exact financial system and the monopoly that the Jagat Seths once ruled. The bankers handed the keys of the kingdom over to a corporation, and it literally cost them everything.
I want to leave you with this powerful final thought derived directly from our sources. When personal interest overshadows national sovereignty, a prosperous region can turn into ruins. You see, the story of the Jagat Seths isn't just some dusty tale about an 18th century banking family. It is a profound, lingering warning about the devastating consequences of greed. It shows us the sheer danger of allowing corporate profit and personal vendettas to dictate the fate of millions. It really leaves us asking, where else in history, or even today, do we see personal financial interests quietly buying the sovereignty of nations? Think about that for a bit. Thank you so much for joining me on This Explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the wealth.